Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to wrap up our four-part August series on the long-term contract module. If you've been following along, we've gone through pretty much the entire process that you would expect to need to be aware of when we're talking about long-term contracts. The initial setup with the defaults, what all those different options mean, and then going through into how to create new contracts, how to take payments, how to send out statements, how to do auto pays, things of that nature. We then went into how to take care of situations where you might need to exchange the inventory that's on those contracts, how to return contracts when needed, how to write off contracts if necessary, if you're not going to collect those back due payments and things of that nature. And this week we're going to take a look at some time savers. AIM is all about getting you your time back so that you can reinvest that into your business and really do things to build your business that just computers flat out can't do. So let AIM do the things that computers can do really well, which is to help you automate procedures, how to help your staff through with these processes and things of that nature. So we're going to take a look at three key time savers today. We're going to look at some contract rates. We're going to look at some templates, and I'll describe what the difference is between those when we get to them. And then we'll wrap up with how to use what are called word templates to help you with some of the more physical functions of your contracts. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, there is the chat option. There will be two tabs, one for the list of the upcoming live streams and also the tab option for chat. Feel free to click on that, and then down at the bottom of the chat tab, there will be a little button where you can click on a nickname, where you can put in your name and then officially log in per se and chat with me, say hi, ask questions, chat with others that are in attendance today. I want to know if there are any questions that you have regarding this or essentially any other contract functions that we've been discussing throughout the course of this month. So let's go ahead, like always, and switch over to my presentation screen. So like I said, we've already discussed a lot of the contract elements, so if we need to, we can go back and revisit those. I'm just going to use the drop-down options to make it a little bit easier for me, but of course you can set up your buttons here accordingly. Now we're probably going to be looking at a lot of things that really you only need to access one time, a lot of maintenance type stuff, so you probably won't be needing buttons for those in the long term. But technically in the maintenance menu, that's where we're going to go. And then we're going to go from there into contracts. And the first thing we're going to look at are what are called contract rates. Now, a contract rate is a very basic type of setup. Essentially, it allows you to go ahead and establish what the ongoing payment rate would be for any products in your system. Let's go ahead and find one. I've actually set up a rate for a product here in the time leading up to this. If I can just remember which one it was. It was this ukulele. Let's go ahead and select that. And you'll see when I hit find and make that selection, it'll bring up the description of the item up here. We can have different rates for different locations. You'll note I don't have any set up for my Iowa City location. Let's go back to Dubuque. And I've created two contract rates for this item, a monthly and a quarterly. I simply click the add button, I give it its description and its rate, and then I hit save. In this case, you can see that I've set up a $15 monthly, quote-unquote monthly rate for my uke, and then a $40 quarterly rate. So the way that this works then is when you are going into a new contract, let's just hop into doing a new contract. And in most cases, this will likely go hand in hand with, say, for example, like your normal rent-to-rent type contracts. Let's just go ahead and keep on picking on my good buddy Mike Anderson here. And let's pick a rent-to-rent. And let's say we're going to go ahead and rent that uke. And of course, I do not know the SKU right off the top of my head, DU150. Let's go ahead and select that. So we can see it's pulling in the description, the normal selling price of this, but we're not in the process of selling this. We are going to be putting this on a rental contract that's just a straight rent to rent. You can see what it's doing is it's letting me know, hey, you have some contract rates. Would you like to use either of these? Let's go ahead and say that this is going to be a month-to-month contract. So I'm going to go ahead and select the monthly. I hit select on that. You can see it's now put this item down below. And if I go to the details tab, you can see it's automatically put $15 into my payment. No more, no less. That's all that a contract rate is really doing, is it's basically establishing what the ongoing payment amount would be. Now, there is no coinciding of a certain contract to a certain contract rate, for example, to a certain type of contract or customer or anything like that. This is attached exclusively at the SKU level. So because I selected that SKU and it saw that there were some rates available from my location, it presented those to me and it asked if I would like to use either of those. If I wanted to take $15 down, I'm going to have to fill that in. And so then the ongoing amount will be the 15 plus tax, so $16.05. And basically just going in and establishing the rest of that. So when I hit save, it will now, of course, ask me how the $16.05 I'm paying down is going to be collected. Let's just say that's paid by cash, and now we'll go ahead and finalize that. And that's basically it. We are done with that contract. We took advantage of the rate, so it will let me fill that in without having to remember what the different rates are. Let's just go ahead and show this to the screen, just like we always do. We're not going to see anything specific to the rate here in and of itself on the receipt, simply the fact that it is letting me know that that next payment amount is the $16.05, and it's established for a monthly payment stream. If I had a different contract default that specifically was a quarterly rent-to-rent where the next payment period was already 3, then I would want to make sure that I do pick that quarterly rate. So there will still be a little bit of thinking revolving around that, but that is going to be where what we call templates come into play. So let's take a look at templates. A template is essentially a more involved setup that you can do for you and your staff ahead of time. If we go into maintenance and contracts, we'll see the option here for adding and changing contract templates. A template is something where you can set a series of parameters or filters or criteria, whatever you want them to be called, and then based on that criteria, it can fill in some of those fields for you. So for example, I've set one up here where I'm calling this template 3-year sales contract with $50 down. Now, all the criteria that I've said here is that it is a contract type specifically to sales contracts. I'm not specifying that it needs to be done at any given location or a specific contract default. Remember, the default is what you call your contract, your contract descriptions. The contract type is typically affiliated with a default. So just keep that in mind. I'm not picking any given category or subcategory of product. I'm not choosing any specific selection code. I'm also not specifying any kind of price range. You can use a mix and match of all of these different criteria so that, let's say, if you are a music store and you are putting some kind of instrument onto a contract, such as a guitar for a 12-month sales contract, this could specify, you could give it the description up here, and you could specifically state in the category that it needs to be in the fretted instrument category. Of course, I don't have fretted. This is my own unique category system. It would be guitars in my example. I could even go so far as to say that there is a difference between acoustic or versus electric versus whatever. But I'm typically probably going to leave that blank, and then I would come down here and set the rest of my criteria. Speaking of that criteria, what can you have it set? Well, as you can see here, based on the above fields, again, description, down through price range. You could have different templates for different ranges of prices. You could maybe say your $300 to $1,000 guitars are a certain type of criteria. Maybe you have a second template for your 1,000 and up, and so on and so forth. But that's the idea. Now, depending on how many templates you set up, there may be more than one that applies. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. But you can basically then tell it, what should these fields be set to? And you can set as many of these as you want. In my case, I'm simply saying that anytime I put something onto a sales contract, I want the total number of payments to be 36, and I want the down payment to be $50. And then technically, if I'm taking the first month's payment up front, I probably want that to be actually 35. So let's go ahead and amend that now that I'm thinking about it. If you need descriptions on what all these fields are, let's just run through them really quick. So the monthly maintenance is how much in maintenance, M&R, that you are collecting every month or every payment period. Are you collecting any lease fees on top of that? And do you want to set what the monthly principal amount should be? We already kind of talked about the total number of payments. Would you like to receive any amounts up front in the form of M&R or lease fees or down payments? And if so, if you are collecting any amount of down payment specifically, how many months would you like the next payment due date to be pushed out? Are you collecting any kind of additional deposit that doesn't necessarily get applied to the contract, but could be down the road, or it could also be refunded if necessary? And do you want the first due date to be a specific date versus the calculated date that it would do based on the current date plus X number of months? So those are all the different criteria that you can set. Again, I'm just going to leave this one very simple, and we'll take a look at how this works. Let's go back into a new contract, and we'll pick on Mike again. And now I want to do a new sales contract. Let's go ahead and select that. And I'm going to put one of my trombones onto contract. And you'll see it got dropped down right down to the bottom. Nothing has popped up yet in regards to any templates. But what you'll notice when I go to the Details tab, it says, hey, you have a template that matches something that we could use in this case. You can see it showing the 3-year sales contract with $50 down. There is no specific inventory category. There's no specific price range. The main thing is that it's a type SF, which is just our internal code for sales contract. Do we want to use this? We also could say show all templates if we wanted to pick a different template. Of course, this is just the only one I have. Or if I wanted to, I could click the Add button here to go in and adjust or add or edit these templates. But let's go ahead and select this. You'll see that because I selected that, it's automatically doing what it normally would do. It'd say, okay, here's the retail value of that item on the contract. It's calculating my tax based on my tax rate. It's saying that I'm going to be collecting $50 in principal plus an additional $350 in tax on top of that. So the total amount, price plus tax less down payment, this is the amount to finance. And it's already saying I want to finance this for 35 months. So that's going to be this month plus the next 35. When I click calculate, it will then say, okay, the total number of payments of 35 comes out to $58.35 plus the $408 in tax. So the first 34 will be at $62.43, and the final payment is at $62.43. So an additional penny rather than having to break it out and say, okay, it's actually 36 payments with 35 at the $62.43, and then the final one at the extra penny or whatever it might be. So that's basically the idea with that. So with templates, you can essentially have all of these fields filled in if you want to take the time to develop those. And again, the more work you can have AIM do here on this screen, the less work you have to rely on your sales staff to fill these details in. In essence, you could have it so that it fills in all of these criteria, and all your salespeople have to do is fill in the remaining details. Is there going to be a particular student or school attached to this contract in the case of our music customers who are probably right in the heart of rental season right now? For everyone else, do you want it to fill in details on, say, for example, your appliance rent-to-own contracts or things of that nature? So there's a lot of capability here, and I encourage you to explore that. Again, the more you can have the computer do, the less you have to rely on your salespeople to do, which helps to negate that human element that is always prone to mistakes, which we'll be taking a look at in the first webinar, the first live stream of September. So then, of course, we would save on that, and then that would create the contract. I'm not going to worry about that. You've seen me doing that all month. I want to take some time to discuss the final little time saver of today's topic, which is all about Word templates. A Word template is something that you can set up using Microsoft Word or an equivalent type of word processing software like OpenOffice or things like that. Anything that can essentially generate a .docx, a .doc, a .dot type file to have AIM fill out for you on your behalf. Now, if we think about the typical contract, there's probably like a sheet of paper that will have all of your verbiage, your terms and conditions, and outside of a computer system, you would probably be having the customer filling out that document with their name, their address, their phone number, their next of kin, where they're working, all those other details for the purposes of having that on the binding contract for what it is that they are going to be paying for that amount of time. With AIM, you can go in and you can essentially type it up what you want it to all say, and you can use a series of what are called tokens or tags to fill in the blanks that AIM can take for you on your behalf. Things and details such as customer name and contact info, inventory that's going under the contract, the terms of the contract, the payment amounts, all of those different things that AIM is keeping track of for you. How does that work? Well, first and foremost, let's look at where you can find your templates. I'm going to just pull this over to the screen so we can kind of see this. In your AIM folder on your server, so in my case it's right on my computer, so it's the C drive and then AIM, there will be a templates subfolder. And in this templates subfolder are a series of default templates as well as a file called, where is it? It's called tag index, and I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it all of a sudden. But let's see if I come over here. Okay. It's interesting. Oh, it's just not letting me scroll down for some reason when I pull it over here. Now my scroll bar is back. So you can see down here, there is a file called tag index. All of these files will be in your AIM templates folder by default. And what this will look like, let's just bring this over so you can kind of see this on screen. Of course, my fat head's in the way. But there are going to be a series of what are called tags. And you essentially would take what's in this left-hand column, and that left-hand tag denotes what that tag actually is over here in the right-hand column. So for example, this double brackets and then today would automatically fill in today's date wherever you put that into the template. There are a bunch of general tags. These are basically details regarding your business, the date of the day, all of these other things. There are also a series of customer tags. You can see these will let you pull in details like account information, name information, address, phone numbers, essentially anything that you want to pull in and display on your template. Further down, there are some rental tags. And this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth. You can see, because this is the contact of the day, you can see there's all kinds of details here for pulling in parameters from your contract. The student and school information, the sub-account number of the contract date, the total rental price, the total tax. There's just about a tag or a token for any minutia of detail that you want to print onto the contract. And there's all kinds of details here where you can get really nitty-gritty, like the down pay plus the deposit that you've collected, the total maintenance versus the monthly maintenance versus the collected maintenance, the total lease fees. I'm not going to name every single one of these because you can take your time to go through and read these out and find out which ones are going to be useful for you. But long story short, there's just about a tag for any particular detail that you want to pull onto a contract. Now, how do you actually use this? I am glad that you asked that, he said to the camera. I have just this is actually not a template specific to a contract per se. This is the standard template that we have for a delinquency notice. So I just kind of want to put these side by side if I can. So in this case, let me just kind of shrink this down just a little bit so we can kind of see these side by side here. This is the template for any given delinquency notice that I'm sending out. And just so that we can kind of see these, what this would pull in, if you think about this as a standard letter, normally you have your store information up at the top left of the letterhead. So that's basically what this is doing. This is pulling in the workstation name, essentially the name of your store, the address, the city, the state, the zip, and then the WRK LOC name, which is the store location description. So, in my case, that would say either Dubuque or Iowa City, essentially. To the right of that, it's saying in plain English, date of this notice, but then it's going to pull in today's date, just like we see here. It'll also print out my phone information from phone 1 and 2. And then this is a little funky, but if you can kind of see over here, this says account, and then it's hard to kind of see, but you'll notice as soon as I press the right arrow, it's jumping down to the next line. That's because all of this information is actually up here. It just doesn't necessarily fit there, but when it actually prints out, it probably will, because all it's pulling in is the customer account plus the rental contract sub-account, which very well will more than likely just fit right there, along with the customer name, their address, city, state, zip, etc., etc. It's also pulling in what's called inventory table. So inventory table is basically the items that are relevant to that contract. In this case, what is the inventory on the contract? It then says in plain English, attach and return this portion with your payment. It is assumed in this case that this is probably on perforated paper. The top portion is to be returned. The bottom portion is the letter in and of itself. And it's basically saying your payment is past due. You are currently payments past due. What is that? Well, that, if we come down here, it is, and I'm sure I'm just gone past it, but it's basically how many payments I'm past due. I'm sure you find it if you really looked for it. And then your last payment was received on, and it would in this case show the last date of the payment I received. Then it goes into detail, total due, total late charges, other charges, etc., etc. When you are done basically organizing your template, back in AIM, what you'd want to do is you'd want to go to Maintenance, General Maintenance, and Maintain Word Templates. And when you come into Maintain Word Templates, you would want to add that template. You give it a description of your choosing. If you are planning on emailing this out, you can type in what you would want it to say in the subject line of the email. The most important two details are the next two fields. What is the template file name? You want to make sure that you save that Word document into that templates folder just for consistency's sake. So you would click the Find button. You'll see a defaults to that templates folder. Right now it's looking at just the quote Word templates in its entirety. If we switch back to the Word 2003 template, which is when most of these were developed back in the day, you can see it showing the rest of those. We would select the template from here. And then the auto-generated code. This is what actually controls the automatic printout of this contract that we're setting up. So this is where you could say that we want AIM to print out that letter, that document, and fill in all those blanks whenever we do a long-term contract. So if we leave this as is, with long-term contract being the auto-generated code in this case, by pointing it then to that file, it would print that file and do what's known as a mail merge of those details and fill in those blanks, fill in that date, fill in that workstation info, fill in that customer info, fill in that contract info every time we do any kind of long-term contract. If we want to have specific templates for specific kinds of contracts, you just pick the appropriate auto-generated code. We want to use a specific one for rent-to-own or rent-to-rent or sales contract. So you could basically set up any kind as well as any number of auto-generated codes. Now, the more you set up, if you have more than one for each specific auto-generated code, let's say you actually wind up with 2 templates that you want to use for any given sales contract. So you have 2 in here that are both pointing to the same auto-generated code. When you save any kind of sales contract then going forward, AIM will pop up and it will ask you, which template would you like to use? That is where the template descriptions are going to be of more importance than usual, because that's what your staff are going to see when they are saving those contracts. So you'll probably want to make sure you add a little bit more to the description so that they'll know which template to use any given time, if you have 2 or more set up. And it's not limited to just the initial contracts. You could set this up for all kinds of long-term functions, such as you can kind of see here, if you do an exchange of inventory, if you do a payoff, if you do a return, and so on. So that's about the extent of the automation there, but the Word templates are not limited to just long-term contracts. You can see there's options in here for new memberships, service documents, proposals, etc., etc., etc. I do have an existing pre-recorded webinar that goes into a lot of these Word template functions. You'll find it all over the video portal right now. I've pretty much got it linked anywhere where it's relevant. It's an older one, so it's about, I think, about an hour long, 40 minutes to an hour long, but it does go into a lot more detail than I'm giving myself time for today. So feel free to definitely check that out at your leisure. And that's basically it. So yeah, that is some of the time-saving functions that I'm thinking will be super helpful for you when it comes to your long-term contracts. If there's any questions on any of this, like I said, feel free to go ahead and post those in the chat box over to the right of my head. If there's any questions that come up down the road, definitely give our support team a call. And next month, like I said, we're going to kind of switch gears and go into our next phase of live stream topics. Let me go ahead and just kind of pull up what those will be. So starting in 2 Tuesdays from now, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, 2 Tuesdays from now, we're going to be looking at what I'm calling When Things Don't Go as Planned, which was the original suggested description of the topic. So essentially, how to take care of human errors, how to adjust for those, how to go back and make corrections, how to reverse things when necessary. It was the top vote getter in last month's poll, so that'll be what we kick things off with. The following Thursday, September 23rd, we're going to go back to covering an older topic, but one that is in need for some updating. and that's going to be an e-commerce overview. So with e-commerce, we're going to be looking at how to kind of prep your system and your inventory for making sales online, how to process those, whether you're using Vortex or a third-party processor, a third-party web host. We'll kind of take a look at the basics of that. And then the following Tuesday after that, September 28th, we'll take a look at some common ways to set up discounts that are going to be automatic at point of sale. Things like volume discounts, buy 3 for the price of 2, or what we call mix and match, where you can buy, let's say, for example, I'm kind of a coffee snob. I have 3 different thermoses here, but let's say that you have an array of products. They're all unique in their own respect, but you want to make it so that if the customers buy a combination of those products, then they get an automatic discount. I kind of call it the build your own 6-pack. If you've ever gone to kind of one of those specialty beer stores where they sell a lot of craft beers, each individual bottle might be $3, but if you put together a 6-pack, you get them all for 10 or something like that. And then also talking about what I'll call your holiday type sales. We got obviously Labor Day coming up this weekend, so we'll kind of miss the ball on that. But if you want to set up the computer so that it automatically calculates sales discounts when a certain time frame hits, like Labor Day weekend or Black Friday, that'll be obviously coming up very soon after that. Things of that nature. You can set up the sales criteria so that AIM just calculates it without you or your staff having to do that on the fly in front of your customers. So those will be the things we'll be looking into. I'm going to actually reopen the poll for the month of October. So up there at the top right, you'll see the button for the link to the poll option. We only wound up with, I think, 1 entry for October. So I'm going to reopen that for the rest of this week. So that poll will close on, let's say, Saturday, September 4th. So that'll give us a couple of extra days where you can go in and make some suggestions for the month of October. If I still don't get any more, I've got plenty of ideas of my own. But I do want to make sure that I'm covering topics that will be helpful to you. So that being said, that's all the time I have for today. So I want to say thank you. I appreciate your attention today. I appreciate you logging in and letting me know that I'm not the only one here talking to the camera. And we'll see you next time. Until then, I hope you can make it a successful and a great day. Take care.